There is a moment that every parent knows, when the house goes quiet in a way that is not peaceful but wrong, when the silence has a weight to it, when the absence of a child's footsteps, a child's laughter, a child's voice calling out from the next room becomes something you feel not in your ears but deep in your chest, in the hollow place beneath your ribs where fear lives. On the morning of Saturday, September 12, 2009, in the small community of Harlan Creek, Tennessee, a collection of trailer homes, modest houses, and gravel roads nestled into the foothills of the Cumberland Plateau, a woman named Diane Mitchell experienced that silence. She walked through her home, calling her son's name. She checked the yard. She checked the shed behind the house where he liked to play. She walked to the edge of the tree line and called his name again, louder this time, her voice carrying over the tops of the yellow-leafed oaks and into the gray morning air. His name was Logan Mitchell. He was 7 years old. He had brown hair that curled at the ears when the weather was humid, and a gap-toothed smile that he had been showing off for nearly 3 weeks since he lost his second tooth. He liked toy trucks. He liked drawing pictures of dinosaurs. He liked sitting on the porch eating crackers with peanut butter and watching the birds come to the feeder his grandmother had hung from the eave. That morning, Logan Mitchell vanished. And for the next 12 years, the question that would haunt everyone who knew him, his mother, his grandparents, the deputies who drove those gravel roads at night with their windows down, listening, was not simply, where did he go? The question was darker than that and far more terrible. The question was, who was the last person to see him alive, and why did they keep changing their story? Harlan Creek is the kind of place that people from Tennessee understand without needing it explained. It is not a town, not exactly. It has no stoplight, no post office of its own. The nearest grocery store is 11 miles down Route 42 in the direction of Cookeville. The roads are named after families who have lived there for generations: Sutton Hollow Road, McCready Branch, Tiller Fork Lane. In September, the hills turn gold and copper, and the mornings carry a chill that smells like wood smoke and creek water. The Mitchell family had lived on Deerfield Cut Road for 6 years by the time Logan disappeared. Diane Mitchell, 31 years old at the time, worked the early shift at a packaging plant in Baxter, 40 minutes away. She left the house each weekday morning before 5:30 and returned home by 2 in the afternoon. She was described by her coworkers as quiet, reliable, and fiercely devoted to her son. She had a small vegetable garden on the south side of the house that she tended on weekends. She drove a white 2003 Chevrolet Cavalier with a broken passenger side mirror that she kept meaning to replace. Logan's father, Derek Mitchell, 34 years old, was not employed steadily at the time of his son's disappearance. He had worked construction through most of his 20s and had done some hauling work for a gravel company in Sparta, but by the summer of 2009, he was between jobs. Neighbors on Deerfield Cut Road remembered him as a man who kept to himself, a man who sat on the porch in the evenings, a man who drove away at odd hours and returned without explanation. Diane and Derek had been together since they were 19. They had never formally married, though Diane wore a ring on her left hand. Those who knew her well said she had talked about leaving more than once. Those who knew Derek described him differently depending on who you asked. Some said he was harmless, just restless. Others chose their words carefully, looking down at the floor before they answered. Logan's grandmother, Patsy Holt, Diane's mother, lived 12 minutes away on Sutton Hollow Road. She watched Logan on Saturdays when Diane occasionally picked up extra hours, and she described her grandson in the particular way that grandmothers do, where each sentence contains more love than language can properly hold. She said he was the kind of child who noticed things. He would stop walking to look at a caterpillar on a leaf. He would ask questions about clouds. She kept a box of his drawings on a shelf in her front room. The Friday before Logan disappeared had been an ordinary day. Diane had the day off. She and Logan went to the library in Cookeville in the morning, and Logan checked out 2 books, one about dinosaurs, one about fire trucks. They stopped at a gas station on the way home, and Logan got a grape slushie, which stained his mouth purple. That evening, Diane made spaghetti for dinner. Logan ate most of his and then asked to be excused so he could go watch cartoons. The temperature that night dropped into the upper 40s. Diane turned on the small electric space heater in the hallway. By 9 o'clock, Logan was asleep in his room, tucked under a blue comforter printed with cartoon bulldozers. His toy trucks were lined up along the windowsill, 7 of them, various sizes, arranged by color the way he always arranged them. The library books were on the nightstand. The room smelled like grape candy and laundry detergent. Derek Mitchell told investigators he had been in the house that evening, watching television in the living room. He said he went to bed around 11. He said he did not hear anything unusual. Saturday morning, September 12, 2009. Diane Mitchell woke at 7:15. She remembers noticing that the house was unusually quiet. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quality of that quiet, the way it pressed against the walls. Then she got up. Logan's room was empty. The blue comforter was pushed back as though he had gotten up on his own. One of the library books was on the floor, open near the middle. The toy trucks were still lined up on the windowsill, all 7 of them, undisturbed. His shoes were gone. His small green jacket was gone from the hook by the door. The swing hung still. The toy truck he had left in the yard the day before lay on its side in the damp grass. The gate at the back of the yard, which latched from the inside, was standing open. Diane Mitchell called out her son's name 14 times in the next 6 minutes. She walked the yard, walked to the road, walked to the edge of the tree line. Then she went inside and called her mother. Then she called 911. The call was logged at 8:03 in the morning. The responding deputy, Raymond Tulliver of the Putnam County Sheriff's Office, arrived at 8:28. He walked the property and the adjacent wood line. He spoke to Diane, who was standing on the porch holding her own elbows, staring at the open back gate. He spoke to Derek, who had come outside in a gray t-shirt and jeans, barefoot despite the cold. Derek Mitchell stood with his hands in his pockets. He said he did not know where Logan was. He said Logan sometimes woke up early and played outside. He said it probably wasn't anything serious. Deputy Tulliver would later write in his notes, "Father appeared calm, not distressed, made reference to boy playing outside as though to discourage concern." But Logan's shoes were gone, his jacket was gone, and the gate that latched from the inside was standing open. It was the beginning of something that would not end for 12 years. By 10 o'clock that Saturday morning, Deerfield Cut Road had been transformed. 2 additional sheriff's office vehicles were parked at angles near the Mitchell property. Patsy Holt had arrived and was sitting at the kitchen table with Diane, holding her daughter's hands across the surface, not speaking. A neighbor, Janet Crossley, had brought over a thermos of coffee that nobody touched. The Putnam County Sheriff's Office initiated a formal missing person search for Logan Mitchell at 9:47 a.m. on September 12, 2009. Search and rescue teams from 2 adjacent counties were requested. A Tennessee Bureau of Investigation special agent, Carla Brandt, was notified and would arrive by noon. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was contacted by early afternoon. Volunteers began arriving without being asked. That is the nature of small communities. Word moved faster than official channels. By 1 o'clock, There were 43 volunteers assembled at a staging area set up in the gravel lot beside a church on Route 42. They were given sectors, assigned in pairs, told to move in lines through the underbrush calling Logan's name. The sound of 43 people calling the same child's name across those hills was something that no one who was there has ever described without pausing. Search dogs were brought in from a facility in Nashville. The dogs were given Logan's blue comforter to scent. They moved through the yard, through the back gate, toward the tree line. What the dogs found, and what investigators noted carefully but did not immediately disclose, was that the scent trail moved north from the back gate for approximately 40 yards and then stopped. Not faded. Stopped. As though Logan had not walked away through those trees on his own. TBI agent Carla Brandt, a 16-year veteran of missing persons investigations, arrived at the Mitchell property at 12:18. She interviewed Diane first in the kitchen, with Patsy present. She then requested to speak with Derek Mitchell separately. The interview with Derek Mitchell took place in the living room, lasting approximately 40 minutes. Agent Brandt's notes from that interview have since become part of the public record, and they contain observations that are, even now, difficult to read neutrally. She noted that Derek Mitchell described the previous evening without hesitation: dinner, television, bedtime, but that when pressed on specific details, his responses became vague. He could not recall what he had watched on television. He could not recall whether he had checked on Logan before he went to bed. He said at one point that he figured the boy was fine because he had not heard crying. Agent Brandt noted, subject showed no signs of distress appropriate to circumstances. No emotional response observed when discussing child's possible whereabouts. Hands remained in pockets throughout interview. Those who knew Derek said he had always been that way. Quiet, contained, difficult to read. His sister, Rhonda Farley of Crossville, told a reporter weeks later that Derek kept things inside and that his composure didn't mean anything sinister. But deputies whispered quietly to one another in the weeks that followed, in the parking lots of gas stations, and in the hallway outside the sheriff's conference room, about the way Derek Mitchell had stood barefoot in the cold that morning as though he already knew there was no reason to look. The timeline presented its own difficulties. Derek told investigators he had last seen Logan at approximately 8:30 the previous evening, Friday, September 11th, when Logan had come to the living room to say good night. He said he had not seen or heard the child after that. This placed a window of nearly 12 hours, from 8:30 Friday evening to 8 o'clock Saturday morning, during which no adult in the household could account for Logan's whereabouts. Diane's account aligned with Derek's on the general outline. She had gone to bed around 10. She had not checked on Logan after that, assuming he was asleep. She had not heard the back door open during the night, but she acknowledged she was a heavy sleeper. Here is where the timeline fractured in a small but significant way. A neighbor, 67-year-old Ernie Crump, whose property backed up to the Mitchell yard on the western side, told investigators that he had been out on his porch at approximately 11:15 on the Friday night, unable to sleep due to back pain. He said he had heard a vehicle engine running near the Mitchell property, not on Deerfield Cut Road itself, but on the narrow service track that ran behind the houses, used occasionally by utility trucks. He said the engine ran for several minutes and then stopped. He said he thought nothing of it at the time. Ernie Crump's statement was taken on September 14th, 2 days after Logan's disappearance. When investigators asked Derek Mitchell about the service track behind the property, Derek said he had not driven back there in weeks. His truck, a dark blue 2001 Ford F-150, was examined by investigators. The odometer reading was noted. The bed of the truck was examined. Investigators noted in their report that the bed contained a faint residue of red clay soil inconsistent with the darker topsoil on Deerfield Cut Road, but consistent with the surface of the service track. Derek Mitchell had an explanation. He said he had used the service track a few weeks prior to haul some scrap metal. The timeline of this explanation could not be verified or disproved. No physical evidence directly linking Derek to Logan's disappearance was found in those first weeks. No clothing, no biological material, no witnesses other than Ernie Crump's account of an engine in the night. The media arrived by the second day. A Cookeville television station ran the story on its Sunday evening broadcast. Logan's school photo was shown, the gap-toothed smile, the brown hair, the blue plaid shirt. By Monday morning, the story had reached Nashville. By Tuesday, it had reached national wire services. Diane Mitchell appeared at a press conference organized by the sheriff's office, standing at a bank of microphones with Patsy Holt's hand on her back, and she asked for anyone with information to come forward. Her voice held the particular steadiness of a person who has not yet allowed herself to collapse, because the collapsing would mean accepting something she cannot yet accept. Derek Mitchell stood at the back of the room during that press conference. He did not speak. He did not put his arm around Diane. Reporters who were present noted later that he looked at the floor for most of the duration. The search continued through September and into October. The woods for 3 miles in every direction were walked and re-walked. A pond a half-mile north of the Mitchell property was drained. A creek that ran along the base of the ridge was examined by dive teams. Cadaver dogs were brought through twice. Nothing was found. By November of 2009, the active search had been officially scaled back. The case was classified as an open missing persons investigation. A tip line remained active. Agent Brandt checked in periodically, but the daily operations, the teams and the volunteers and the dogs, they were gone. Deerfield Cut Road went quiet again. The leaves fell. The first snow of the season came in December. Logan's bicycle stayed in the carport, one wheel still slowly turning when the wind blew through. For those who have ever lived alongside a grief that has no ending, no ceremony, no body to bury and a grave to visit, you understand what the Mitchell family carried into the years that followed Logan's disappearance. It is not a closed wound. It is an open one that you learn to move around, that you organize your life to accommodate, that wakes you at 3 in the morning because you heard something in the wall, and for 1/2 second you believed it was him. By the spring of 2010, 6 months after Logan vanished, Diane Mitchell had moved out of the house on Deerfield Cut Road. She could not stay there. Every morning she woke in that house, she woke to the empty room, the bulldozer comforter, the trucks lined up on the windowsill. She moved into her mother's house on Sutton Hollow Road. She brought the box of Logan's drawings. She brought the comforter. She brought the library books, never returned, overdue by more than 100 days. The fine long since forgiven by the Cookeville Library without being asked. Derek Mitchell remained in the house on Deerfield Cut Road. Investigators noted this. Neighbors noted this. Those who drove past on those gravel roads at night noted the dark blue truck parked in the same spot, the porch light on or off, the curtains that never moved. Diane and Derek's relationship, which had been corroding for years before Logan's disappearance, did not survive the winter of 2010. They separated formally in February. They did not speak of what each believed, or perhaps they did once, and that was the end of it. Diane has not spoken publicly about the nature of her conversations with Derek during those months. What she has said, in a single interview given to a Nashville journalist in 2015, was this: "There were things I noticed that I put away. things I didn't let myself look at directly, because if I looked at them directly I would have known, and knowing would have meant something I couldn't survive. This is the particular cruelty of cases like Logan Mitchell's. The evidence does not arrive in a flood. It arrives in drops, in the way a man stands with his hands in his pockets while others weep, in the clay soil in the truck bed, in an engine running on a service track at 11:15 on a Friday night. Each drop, alone, means nothing. Together they mean everything. But the together only becomes visible in retrospect when it is too late to take back the years of not knowing. Patsy Holt kept the tip line number written on a piece of paper taped to her refrigerator. She called the sheriff's office every 3 months. She attended every meeting organized for families of missing children she could find, driving hours when necessary. She kept a photograph of Logan on her mantle, not the school photo that appeared on television, but a different one, taken at a birthday party the summer before he vanished. In it, Logan was laughing at something outside the frame, his whole face open and uncalculated the way children's faces are before they learn to manage their expressions for the camera. Diane worked. She worked and she moved through her days with a precision that people around her recognized as the architecture of survival. She returned to the packaging plant. She got a second job on weekends at a grocery store in Cookeville. She slept in her childhood bedroom at her mother's house with Logan's drawings in a box under the bed. She still searched, not with teams and dogs, but in her own way. She drove the roads at night sometimes. She stopped at places that felt significant without being able to say why. She kept notes in a spiral notebook, things she remembered, things she had noticed, things she had not told investigators because at the time she had not understood what they meant. The smell of something in the truck bed the morning after Logan vanished. A shovel that had been leaning against the shed for months, but was somewhere different on Saturday morning, September 12th, 2009. A handful of red clay dried on the wheel arch of the dark blue F-150 that she had not remembered seeing before. She wrote these things down. She kept the notebook. In the years that followed, Derek Mitchell's life unraveled in the ordinary ways that lives unravel when they are held together by things that cannot hold. He lost the house on Deerfield Cut Road in 2013, unable to make payments. He moved twice, ending up in a rented room in a town called Silver Point, 30 miles from Harlan Creek. He worked irregular jobs. He did not speak publicly about Logan. He gave no interviews. He did not attend any of the anniversary vigils that Patsy Holt organized each September on the gravel lot beside the church on Route 42. Each September 12th, Patsy Holt lit candles. She placed them in paper bags along the edge of the road. The congregation of the Harlan Creek Church of God came to stand with her. People brought flowers, stuffed animals, notes. A deputy from the sheriff's office came each year, a different deputy most years, but always one, and stood at the edge of the gathering and bowed his head. Logan Mitchell would have been 8 in 2010, 9 in 2011, 10, 11, 12. He would have started middle school. He would have learned to ride his bicycle without training wheels because Diane remembered he had not quite mastered it yet in the summer of 2009. He would have grown. Instead, there was the box of drawings under the bed. The library books never returned. The 7 toy trucks on the windowsill, which Diane had eventually wrapped in a dish towel and placed in a box she kept in her mother's closet and could not bring herself to open or throw away. Clear's throat. In 2017, 8 years after Logan vanished, the Putnam County Sheriff's Office received a request from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to formally review the case file in connection with a statewide audit of cold case investigations involving children. Agent Brandt, now a senior investigator, was assigned to lead the review. She had never stopped thinking about the case. She had a copy of her original notes in a file cabinet at home. She had the image of Derek Mitchell standing barefoot in the cold saved somewhere in the back of her mind, the kind of image that does not fade the way other things fade. The review was quiet. It produced no new arrests, no new charges, but it produced one new action. Investigators reached out to Derek Mitchell for a voluntary follow-up interview. He declined through a lawyer he had retained in Cookeville, a detail that Agent Brandt noted carefully, given that the man had no formal charges pending against him. Why does an innocent man retain a lawyer to avoid a voluntary conversation about his missing son? Deputy Tulliver, now retired, put it simply when asked about the case years later. He said, "You see a lot of things in this job. You develop a sense, and I never felt right about that morning. Not once in 12 years. The breaking point, when it came, did not come from forensics. It did not come from a new witness or a deathbed confession or a technological breakthrough in DNA analysis. It came from something far more human and far more devastating. It came from a child." In the spring of 2021, a 14-year-old girl named Kayla Farley, the daughter of Derek Mitchell's sister Rhonda, told her school counselor at a middle school in Crossville, Tennessee, that she had something she needed to tell someone, that she had been carrying it for a long time and that she could not carry it anymore, that she had been 11 years old and had not understood what she was seeing at the time, but that she was older now and she did understand, and that it made her sick. The school counselor, following mandatory reporting protocol, notified the Cumberland County Department of Children's Services. A forensic interview was conducted on April 9, 2021. Kayla Farley, composed and specific in the way that children who have held secrets for years are often composed and specific when they finally release them, described what she had witnessed in September of 2009. She had been spending a weekend at her grandmother's house, which was located 15 miles from Harlan Creek. Her uncle Derek had come to the house early on a Saturday morning. She remembered it was a Saturday because cartoons were on television. She remembered he arrived before breakfast because she had not eaten yet. She remembered he was carrying something wrapped in a blue blanket. She remembered the blanket had a pattern on it, though she could not specify the pattern clearly. She remembered her uncle going to the back of the house with it, and that she had watched from the window. She said she had heard her uncle and her grandmother speaking in low voices. She said her grandmother, Derek's mother, Loretta Mitchell, who had since passed away in 2018, had sounded upset. She said her uncle's voice was flat and even. She said she had asked her own mother, Rhonda, later what was happening, and Rhonda had told her it was nothing, that she should not mention it, that there was nothing to tell. She had not mentioned it for 10 years. But she was 14 now, and she had learned in school about a boy named Logan Mitchell, a class assignment on Tennessee cold cases, and she had looked at his photograph and recognized in his face the face of the child she had seen her uncle carrying wrapped in a blue blanket on a Saturday morning in September of 2009. The TBI opened a formal criminal investigation on April 17, 2021. Agent Brandt was assigned as lead. The case number was updated. The status changed from missing persons to suspected homicide. Investigators obtained records from the property previously owned by Loretta Mitchell, now occupied by another family who had purchased it in 2019. A search warrant was executed on April 29, 2021. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed to survey an area behind the property where a structure, a small outbuilding used as a storage shed, had been demolished and the ground regraded some years before. The radar returned an anomaly at approximately 3 feet below the surface in an area, approximately 12 yards north of where the shed had stood. Excavation began on April 30th. At 2:17 in the afternoon on April 30th, 2021, the remains of a child were found. The remains were recovered and transported to the State Medical Examiner's Laboratory in Nashville. Dental records were requested. DNA samples were compared to the biological material on file from the original missing persons investigation. On May 4, 2021, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation confirmed that the remains were those of Logan Mitchell, age 7, missing since September 12, 2009. He had been there for 12 years, 12 autumns and 12 springs and 12 first snows, 12 Septembers when his grandmother lit candles and placed them in paper bags along the edge of the road and called his name into the dark. Derek Mitchell was located at his rented room in Silver Point on the morning of May 6, 2021. 2 TBI agents and a Cumberland County Sheriff's deputy knocked on his door at 8:14. A neighbor, who watched from across the parking lot, later described the moment to a local reporter. She said he opened the door and looked at the agents and did not say anything for a long moment. She said she could not read his face from where she was standing. She said he stepped back into the room and the agents followed him in, and then the door was closed. Derek Mitchell was arrested and charged with first-degree homicide in connection with the death of Logan Mitchell. He was transported to the Cumberland County Detention Center. He did not speak to reporters. His attorney, the same Cookeville lawyer who had helped him avoid the voluntary interview 4 years earlier, issued a brief statement saying his client maintained his innocence and looked forward to presenting his defense in court. The arrest was announced at a press conference on May 6, 2021, by TBI Director David Roush and Putnam County Sheriff Eddie Farris. It was a Wednesday morning. The sun was out. Reporters from Nashville and Cookeville stood on the steps of the sheriff's building with cameras and notebooks. Director Roush stood at the microphone and said that after 12 years, answers had been found, and that the TBI was committed to ensuring justice for Logan Mitchell. Diane Mitchell was not at the press conference. She was at her mother's house on Sutton Hollow Road, where Patsy Holt had held her hand across the kitchen table 11 years earlier and not spoken. Diane's friend and co-worker, a woman named Bate Cannon, drove her to the house that morning and sat with her. According to Bate, Diane sat very still when she received the news, and then she walked to the back of the house and stood in Patsy's garden and looked at the hills for a long time without speaking. She had kept the notebook. She had written things down for 12 years, the small observations that had not made sense on their own, the shovel that had moved, the clay on the wheel arch, the truck engine in the dark at 11:15. The spiral notebook had been in a drawer at her mother's house for 12 years, and every entry in it had been, in its own way, a refusal to stop believing that the truth would eventually come. Patsy Holt, 74 years old at the time of the arrest, spoke briefly to a Cookeville television reporter from the front porch of her house on Sutton Hollow Road the afternoon of May 6, 2021. She was wearing a blue cardigan. Her white hair was pinned back. The reporter asked how she was feeling. Patsy Holt looked at the camera for a moment, and then she looked away, toward the tree line at the edge of her yard, and she said, very quietly, "He was never lost. We just didn't know where he was yet, but we never stopped." Rhonda Farley, Derek's sister and Kayla's mother, issued a written statement through an attorney expressing sorrow for the Mitchell family and saying that her daughter had shown tremendous courage. The statement acknowledged that Rhonda had not acted sooner in bringing forward what her daughter witnessed and expressed remorse for the years that had been lost. Rhonda was questioned by investigators and ultimately not charged in connection with the case. In the months following Derek Mitchell's arrest, the community on Deerfield Cut Road held its own reckoning. People who had lived near the Mitchells for years, who had walked those volunteer search lines in September of 2009, calling Logan's name, who had stood at Patsy's candlelight vigils each year. They sat with the knowledge that the answers had been there, in some form, all along. That a child had been carrying the weight of what she witnessed for a decade, because the adults around her had told her not to speak. This is the particular silence that true crimes leave behind. Not only the silence of the victim, but the silence of the ones who knew something was wrong and could not find a way to say so. The silence of the questions not asked, the statements not given, the notebook entries that took 12 years to be read by the right pair of eyes. The case against Derek Mitchell proceeded through the courts of Putnam County. A grand jury returned a true bill of indictment in June of 2021. His trial was set and subsequently delayed twice due to procedural motions. As of the time of this documentary's completion, the legal proceedings were ongoing. The full accounting of what happened on Deerfield Cut Road and on a service track in the dark, and at a property 15 miles away still being assembled piece by piece before a court of law. But Logan Mitchell had been found. After 12 years, his mother knew where he was. His grandmother knew. The 7 toy trucks wrapped in a dish towel in a box in a closet had a child to belong to again, even if the belonging now was of the particular and permanent kind that comes after, not before. The cases like Logan Mitchell's ask something of all of us. They ask us to sit with the discomfort of how long the truth can be delayed. How a child can vanish from a small community where everyone knows everyone's truck and everyone's road and everyone's schedule, and still not be found for 12 years. They ask us to consider what is lost in the silence. Not only justice, though justice matters enormously, but the years of a family living in the suspension between knowing and not knowing, between hope and grief, between the child who was and the absence that replaced him. They ask us to notice when something doesn't fit, the composure that is too steady, the hands that stay in the pockets, the engine running on a service track at 11:15 on a Friday night, the shovel that moved. These things do not arrive labeled. They arrive as small wrong notes in an otherwise ordinary day, and the most important thing is that someone somewhere does not look away. Kayla Farley was 11 years old when she saw what she saw and was told not to speak about it. She was 14 when she finally found the words and found the person to say them to. Her courage did not undo the 12 years. Nothing can undo those years. But her voice, when she finally used it, did the thing that voices are for. It brought a child home. Logan Mitchell was 7 years old. He liked toy trucks. He liked dinosaurs. He liked grape slushies and drawing pictures and watching birds from the porch. He deserved a life that stretched beyond the Cumberland Plateau autumn into everything a life can become. He deserved, at the very least, to be found. After 12 years, he was. If this story mattered to you, if Logan's name mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share this episode. Someone, somewhere, may still be waiting to be heard. And sometimes, the only thing standing between silence and truth is a person willing to pass the story on.